Hi, I'm Marjorie Healy, and welcome to another episode of Behind the White Picket Fence, where life is both messy and beautiful. Today I have on Dave Robinson from Work Your Stories. Welcome. Welcome to
Thank
the
you.
show. Yeah, so glad to have you on.
This is going to be so fun. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I am too. I will say we met actually on social media. We forgot to, in our preparation, I meant to say this. This is how we met, which is one of the joys of social media.
It's really awesome because we were talking beforehand about how sometimes as coaches or professionals, it feels like, oh, we might not be like reaching people or people might not be listening, but we listened enough to what the other person was saying and talking about in order to even get on here today. So it's super fun to be able to do that and share with the people who are listening here, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's so true, right? We know that when we connect like that, we know we are making an impact. We are finding each other and we are able to explore the different things we do and share and learn from one another. So today
Love it.
we're going to cover kind of what you do, how you do it, why you do it, and then touch on some key things. I made a list of some things that from our previous conversations that I was so curious to know your thoughts on intuition, synchronicity, disease, and meditation. So that's kind of my go-to list. I know we might go off topic or stray, but that's about what I'd like to kind of cover today. And who knows, maybe we'll do more of these conversations as we go along. But let's start with what is Work Your Stories? Give us some background on what you do, because I know, because I've spent some time listening and researching you and learning about you. But obviously, my audience does not know what Work Your Stories is. So share with us.
So, y'all may know this listening, and there are unconscious or subconscious narratives. Sometimes they are conscious, right? But there are these narratives or beliefs or stories that are running the show underneath the surface. And most of us, most of the time, don't even realize that they're there. So,
Right.
these narratives or these stories, which are made up of thoughts, which are made up of words, right? If we want to break it down even more, but these stories oftentimes create states of stress, or they create states of dis-ease, or they create states of conflict, either internally or externally. And so, what I do at Work Your Stories is I take my clients into the deep end, as we were just talking about. I take my
Yeah.
clients into their innermost caves, inside of themselves, and we go in together to those dark places or those shadowy places of our hurtful past experiences, or our current negative thought patterns, or
Mhm.
our anxieties about the future. And we fight the dragons and we tame the dark wolves, and we come out of those caves with the treasures and the gold and the elixir and the lessons that we can alchemize from those experiences to better understand our world, better understand our experiences, and
Mhm.
ultimately help create generational love. A lot of times people talk about generational curses, which are really stories that have been passed down through the generations. And
Right.
what I love to do is focus on the love piece, and to say the definition twice in one sentence, but I focus on helping my clients break those patterns and adjust or shift those stories or feel the things that they need to feel in order for love to fill in the gaps and to take the place of those old pains and hurts. And so
Right.
it's a methodology of helping people feel better mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and it's a wellness practice.
Right, right. Because I think some of the stories that we don't even know we have. I mean, I remember, as I'm on my healing journey, reading a book and it impacting me and realizing some of my feelings I was experiencing were attached to a story I had told myself that was completely limiting. So I'm sure you're finding clients are coming to you because their stories are holding them captive to a life that they otherwise are missing out on.
You're 1,000% correct with that. And sometimes I find clients saying, "Oh, well, they are holding me back, or he's holding me back, or she's holding me back, or something's holding me back," and we sub those words for "I am holding me back," right? And ultimately, that gives a lot of power to my
Right.
clients and to anybody listening, because I'm the problem, I'm the solution. There's an opportunity there to work through those things that have been bothering us, if we know about them, or have an opportunity for a professional to help highlight some things and shine a light on some things that may be bothering them they might not know about,
Right.
and so once we have that awareness, we can actually do something about it. And that doing something about it is downshifting into the parasympathetic state, that rest and relax state. So we can actually heal and then ultimately go in and observe the stories as opposed to participate in the stories.
Mm.
And then maybe we'll change some words around, but we'll certainly have a different perspective afterwards.
Right. I mean, I like how you touched on, I'm the problem and I am the solution because you are both. I mean, you could live or write your own story if you see yourself as the solution.
There's always multiple different perspectives as well to
Mhm.
certain events and things. And if we're talking about the past, I like to say that we can connect the dots after we collect the dots, right? So there's a
Okay.
reason why things have happened, and you
Mm.
can look and see the links between XYZ. um, I did an exercise today that kind of highlighted both sides of things. I had a previous background in fitness and health, and I had a company whose tagline was grind on from
Mm.
2017 to early 2020. And so guess what I was doing? Just grinding my face off, working all
Right.
hours, making it hard. It was hard. I thought it had to be hard. And that's what you do, right? You grind, you push, you pull, you do all the stuff. And I had a realization one day, and I focused on the actual words, and I was like, does it have to be hard? Like, what if it were easy? I asked myself that question. What if it were easy? I was like,
Right.
whoa, okay, well, what would that mean? And I turned it into a great affirmation. I am easy, or I am ease. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean I don't work hard. It's
Right.
quite the opposite, in fact. And it shifts our perspective to what we actually want. So I had a client this morning, and he's doing really well. It's been a couple weeks since we worked together, and you know, um, we could have gone into the deep end again, and he's doing great. So I was like, hey, like, let's ride the momentum. And
Right.
uh, I asked him to write on the prompt, journal on the prompt, what if it were easy? And the first time he did it, he spent 5 minutes or so on it. And it was all like, if it was easy, I wouldn't be happy. If it was easy, I would be lazy and comfortable and yada, yada, yada. And he looked towards that probably more cultural
Mhm.
idea of, good stuff is not supposed to be easy, right? Good
Mm.
stuff is supposed to be hard, right? From
Right.
culture. And he read it out loud, and I was like, "How's it feel?" And I was like, he said, "It doesn't really feel great. I'm glad I'm working hard now." I said, "Oh, yeah, me too. And let's look at it from this other lens. What if it were easy were a good thing?" And we're not talking about, not working. We're not talking about laying on the couch. We're not talking about spending time on yachts or, anything like that, but just like, let's put a different spin on this. And it ended up being so eye-opening and so powerful for him because it he talked way more about being in what I would call flow, or
Right.
being in purpose, or being in passion, as opposed to other aspects of what we might think is negative traits of so
Right.
it's the same story, same words, but now we're looking at it through two different lenses, and we're getting two different outcomes. And I asked him
Right.
which one he preferred, and he said obviously the second one. I was like, okay, great. So
Work done. Check.
yes,
Go into
yes,
your
yes.
week with that. Well, I mean, you touched on a word that I absolutely love, which is flow, which is when we're living in our purpose or we're living with intention, it's so much easier. But you also touched on something so interesting, which is societal cultural norms that are in our language that we feel, as business, we're both entrepreneurs, that we're just supposed to work hard all the time. We're supposed to grind it out because that's what the culture has told us, and that's a societal way of being, which isn't
Mhm.
necessarily the way we need to be.
There's a great word floating around, or a word floating around. I'm not sure if it's great, but have you noticed the word abundance floating around on
Mm,
social media, or
yes.
in certain circles, right? Abundance, abundance, and it's usually in regards to wealth. The etymology of abundance is actually pretty good, and look at what it sounds like: a bound dance. a
Mm.
bound dance,
Mhm.
abundance, a bound dance. And so what I see is just like turning in circles, just like doing the show to do the show and like trying to, almost like a keep up with the Joneses and like just following the same old patterns and not really enjoying that process. That's what I see when I
Yeah.
say that word. And other people may see different things. But I instead swap the word
Hmm.
affluence, which means
Okay.
to flow
Right.
to flow. And I see myself stepping out into a stream or a river and having the water wash over me. And there's in the water are so many opportunities and so many, things that are coming. And if I want to let go, I can just like kind of lay down and just float down the river of affluence of flow and have these beautiful opportunities come to me because I'm doing my part by being there and saying things and doing things and helping people and etc. And so to me affluence gives an entirely different feel than abundance.
Right.
And as opposed to just using words to use words, like let's examine the words and see if these are the words that we want to be using on a regular basis to
Right.
describe our life experiences. And that's a big part of story work as well.
Well, yeah, are they going to be part of our story? And should we examine what parts of our story are they going to be and how are they impacting us? What does that look
Mhm.
like? What does that mean? I mean, I refuse to be busy to a way that exhausts me because what does that do for people? What does that do for me? How can I help? I can't. How can I be part of the solution to someone else's life or part of the elevation, not the solution, but
Mm.
part of their journey to rise up. If I'm running, I always say pillar to post, which is a saying my parents used to say, or running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I think that that's the way it's supposed to be versus the river you describe, you letting things, that affluence and letting it flow and you'll hold on to what makes sense and you'll let what doesn't float by.
And that's a way to impact or greater increase the impact that we have. My personal definition of impact is the ripples we create and send out into our world. And we can do that positively or negatively, right?
Right.
And we often don't see those ripples. And, um, you know, better me, better everyone means that when I'm better, I can more positively affect, throw in a bigger rock into the pond, and then ripples can be bigger and farther. And if I'm grinding or if I'm going pillar to post or running around with a chicken with my head cut off or not nourishing myself, meaning not putting the things into my body in that come through my ears, as far as what I'm listening to, that come in with my eyes, as far as what I'm watching or consuming, the programming that I'm interacting with, what I'm putting into my mouth, my body, what am I eating? What am I drinking? If I'm not nourishing myself with experiences and with love and with connection, then I'm gonna be dropping little tiny teeny grains of sand into the pond, and those ripples are not gonna go very far,
Yeah.
versus the opposite of that, which is what health and wellness and vitality to me are all about.
Right. It's so good having you on because I'm a parent and youth coach, and I work with the majority with parents, and then when I get a youth, I usually am interacting with the parents as well. So it's rarely just the youth that's sitting in front of me. But what I love about what you're saying, and I stress this so much in my work, is to the parents, if you are guiding, loving, witnessing your child, and in order to do that as well as you can, I need to know you're well from
Mhm.
like as you said, from a completely holistic place because there's a funny saying out there. It says you're only as happy as your happiest kid. And I like to
Mm.
challenge that a little bit and say, I don't know if that's so true. I think our jobs are to guide our children through all of their emotional experiences and be their loving support. But we want to put ourselves in the best position to do that. And
I
I
I
think
agree.
Yeah, I think that's why you're such a benefit to my, the people who listen to this podcast and know who I am and know what I do. I wanted to share your work with them because there's all different roads to what that looks like. There's all different ways to get healthy and there's different people who can help you do that and you're one of them. So I really wanted to have you on because I hear the stories people tell themselves and when I, came across you or we found each other, I thought, oh my goodness, you could benefit so many people. I need to share what you do with others.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And we all have stories, and so just like there's so many parents out there, we've all been the children of somebody, right? So there's
Right.
a lot of opportunities to impact, and so it's really great to have the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree. I mean, you're right. We've all been somebody's child at one point along the way, and we've all been impacted in different ways. And along our journey, we've collected our stories, and
Yes.
and a lot of times they are unconscious. The people who call you have chosen to see it, and or part of it, enough of it to come and join you and work with you. So I think my next question for you is to touch on some of these things I mentioned in the beginning. I'm just curious. I mean, you see so many people, and so I always love to know other people who do similar work that I do in this field. What are your thoughts on intuition? Because I think for a long time, if I could just even say my own journey, there were times along the way that I was letting fear tell a story that was interrupting, and I couldn't tell if it was something I was afraid of or something that was intuitively telling me, no, don't touch that fire, it's hot. So, what are your thoughts on intuition and how does it show up in the work that you do?
Yeah, great question. We talk a lot in my circles about getting out of our head and getting into our body,
Mm,
right? Nobody really has walking thoughts, right? We
right,
have racing thoughts. And it's oftentimes we're so focused on thinking in our society, and we're so focused on feeling our emotions in our society that we override our inner knowing
right,
oftentimes with the head or the heart. And not that thinking or feeling are bad in any way, shape, or form. It's just like, let's add another element to the equation here. And so for me, what I really love to do with my clients and personally is get out of my head and get into my body. And we do that with our breath.
right.
We do that with our breath. Right. And ultimately, there's so many ways to tap into that inner intuition or inner knowing or that your gut. And your gut is rarely wrong. It's very rarely wrong.
Do you think it's
Um,
ever
and
wrong?
it's gotta be wrong sometimes, right? Because ever is so binary, so black and white,
Okay,
right?
fair.
So yeah, like the sun always comes up, right? At least for another billion-ish years, and, I do think there are times when our guts could, uh, potentially lead us astray, but maybe not even that. Maybe more so make decisions that, with our guts that have outcomes that we maybe don't want. And I'll give you an example, right? So
Mm,
I'll give you two examples actually. One is uh, I use my gut intuition to pick my university, my college, way back 20
mm,
plus years ago, right? And it was I had two schools. I'm on the East Coast of the states, and I had two schools as my finalists. I had Virginia Tech University and I had James Madison University, and I had done my pros and cons list. I had visited both schools. I had friends going to both schools. There was options for both, right? And I couldn't decide. I couldn't
right,
decide. So I was laying in my bed one night and I was up late and I was fretting over this and had created a lot of anxiety over this. And so I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna make a decision. I'm just gonna get it over with. So I grabbed a quarter and I was like, all right, heads is Virginia Tech, tails is JMU. One time, flipped it, caught it, flipped it again, put it down on the top of my hand, and it was heads, Virginia Tech. And I was like, "Hmm, maybe I'll do best two out of three. One time is kind of not fair, right? One time's
okay.
kind of not fair.
Right,
So I was
right.
like, okay, all right, all right, all right. Like that's too much chance. Like, let's give it a little bit more here. So I flipped it again, caught it, turned it on the top of the hand, and it was tails. It was JMU. I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, all right, this is it. Flipped it, caught it, put it on the top of my hand, heads, Virginia Tech. And my first thought was, shoot. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go to JMU.
right.
Now, whether that was the right choice or not, like, I don't know. There's a lot of things I would have done differently in college. There's a lot of things that maybe Virginia Tech would have been the right choice. But in that
Right.
moment, I actually, and I learned this 15 years later, I used a type of decision making process called flippism. That's actually a real thing.
Mm,
It's like you flip a coin and you judge your inner response, right? And
right.
I listened to that feeling right in my diaphragm, right underneath my sternum, and I was like, okay, like the choice that I had doesn't feel right. What's the other choice feel like underneath all of those layers, like deep
Right.
inside? And it gave me more peace and safety to choose the latter, choose the other choice. And so I went there, right? Um, Other examples, uh, I was in a 5.5, 6 year relationship through my 20s with a girl I'd even dated in college, and we had did long distance for a couple years, and then she moved back across the state. She was getting her master's degree, and we moved in together, and it was really amazing for the first couple years. And I thought, like, okay, this is it. This is the girl I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, right? And as I built my career and she built her career, there was a lot of stress, and we were way more immature as 23-year-olds than I am
Right.
now, 15 years later, whatever. And we had a rather immature relationship, and a lot of our old stories and patterns from both of our lives and both of our parents and et cetera showed up. And we had a lot of toxicity. And I definitely wasn't very safe emotionally in that relationship, and I couldn't really be myself in that relationship, and it started to show up physically, where it was affecting me physically, right?
Right.
And on the outside looking in, I'm dating the prettiest girl I've ever seen. We got literally a house downtown Richmond with a literal white picket fence. We've got a cute little dog. We've been together all this time, so in my head, I'm like going through all these things. All my friends are saying, oh, when are you going to ask the question? My parents are asking, when are you going to marry her? Yada yada. And for some reason, I just couldn't go down that path at that point. I
Right.
couldn't make that decision. But my head, I'm thinking all these logically, like this makes perfect sense logically, like I should do this. And then my
Right.
heart was saying, oh, but I love her. And I did. And it was, oh, I do love her. Right. Okay. But my gut and my intuition and my inner knowing were saying, no, 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 big hard X, send the fire, pull the
Yeah.
fire alarm, like, do not
Do not
continue.
do this.
Exactly. And, it took me a couple years to recognize that and to gain the courage to actually end that relationship, which, um, I it took me some time to get over that afterwards. That's actually one
Right.
of the first stories that I worked when I found Storywork was my own story of top of the steps, where I walk down the steps and I look back up and she's at the top of the steps of outside of our house, and she's there with the dog, and I waved goodbye and I knew I'd never see her again. And um she's happily married now, and
Right.
I am happily engaged to the most amazing woman I've ever met, and I have an incredible vocation and career that I wouldn't have had without that, those experiences. And I
Right.
listened to my gut as opposed to making an emotional or logical decision with that went against what I knew to be true.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get themselves in trouble because they go with the safe route, or they're scared to make a change, or they, listen to their heart as opposed to listening to what their body's actually telling them.
Well, and I love what you said because I mean, there's two things that I hear in your response. And one of them is that your gut intuition leads you to the places you're supposed to be for the learning that
Mm,
has to happen for the next step to reveal itself. But one of the things you that really struck me, and I hear this all the time, is your intuitive knowing can feel quite consequential. I mean, leaving that relationship had some big consequences for you. And I mean, I can even speak for myself. My intuitive knowing led me out of a 21-year relationship, a marriage with 3 kids, a life, a big home, a community, but my knowing my intuitive knowing knew that that wasn't a space for me anymore, and had nothing to do with all, as you said, all the logical reasons to stay, and had everything to do with it just not being what was working for my own intuitive self. And that meant, that there was going to be a family breakdown and a move out of the house. And those are big deals. And I think a lot of people are afraid of their knowing. So, my kind of follow up question that I didn't even plan on asking you was, how do you help your clients face that intuitive knowing when it has high consequences?
Excellent question again, and ultimately, it comes down to identifying the desired outcome, but even further than that, going way beyond SMART goals, right? It's like,
Right,
let's put ourselves in the place that we wanna be in 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, right? So
right.
I do a perfect day exercise when it comes to these types
Mm.
of things, and, this can be very illuminating for people, and if you're listening to this, you can make a note or hit pause, grab a piece of paper, and run this exercise, and then hit resume, and it'll be really fun, but, we typically start with the 1 year perfect day, and again,
Right,
this isn't, yachts in the Bahamas and not, let's be reasonable enough. And
right,
especially when we get to the 3 year, 10 years, there is no such thing as an unrealistic goal or dream, merely an unrealistic timeline.
right,
I'll say that again. No such thing as unrealistic goals or dreams, merely unrealistic timelines. And so, for people who are experiencing or in an environment or living a life or perhaps climbing a mountain that they don't really want to climb or that isn't serving them or is causing pain or dis-ease or other things that are very unpleasant and it's just not worth it anymore and they felt this way for a while and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, okay, well, let's figure out where you actually want to go first before we make decisions. And I always tell my clients I am story agnostic. I am
mm,
outcome agnostic. Like, we can
mhm,
work whatever story we need to work. I don't care whether you stay or whether you go. I don't care whether
right,
it's left, right, up, down, forward, backwards, and I'm here to help my clients make the best decisions for them in their future. And so, what I've found, let's talk career, right? What I found
right,
for a lot of people is, and men largely are it goes both ways, all ways, right? But men deal with this a lot, and that they'll climb a mountain just to climb a mountain,
right,
right? And say, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. I mean, a little stubborn, little lack of asking directions. Again, generalities, and I can raise my hand to say like, "Hey, been there, done that." But a lot of times we'll get to the top of the mountain, accomplish the goal, be the thing, do the thing, and then be like, "Oh, well, now what?" And they either camp out at the top of the mountain, and now, hey,
yeah,
well, I don't want to go climb any of these other mountains because it means I might have to go back down this one. I just did all that work, or they'll continue trudging up, the same path over and over and over again, or maybe we get to the top and we're just freaking miserable. And it's like, okay, well,
mm,
there are other mountains on this mountain range. It's very rarely
mhm,
is there a mountain in isolation. Those are called volcanoes, right?
yeah,
And there's lots
fair,
of paths up and down a mountain. Maybe it's an easy road, maybe it's a foot trail, maybe it's a game trail, a lot smaller, and you got to kind of get in the underneath the branches and briars, or maybe you just got
mhm,
to hack your way up your own path. But like, let's make sure that you're climbing the right mountain. And if you're not, let's figure out the best way to exit this mountain and pick the right path that will lead you to the mountain that you want to be climbing. And
right,
a lot of times that's with careers, sometimes that's with relationships, sometimes that's with decisions, but it's affecting some of the big areas of our life, faith, family, friends, fitness, finance, and fun. I call them the F buckets. But
mm,
it's probably affecting one, two, or most or all of those. And not making a decision is, in fact, making a decision. So
right,
uh, let's actually do one.
right. I love your F list. I have not heard that before. I'm gonna be hitting pause after to write down your F list. I love it.
I'll
Yeah,
say it a little slower. I'll say it a little
yeah,
slower. It's faith, family and friends, and faith is spirituality, family and friends is
Absolutely.
relationships, fitness, which is health, finance, which is your work environment, and fun, which is like,
Right.
other than love, fun is the point. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
If we're not having fun every now and then, at the very least, like, let's reassess. Let's reassess.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And that even today I said we're going to have so much fun. This is going to be so much fun. And it is. I can't stop smiling listening to you.
it's fulfilling, that bucket for me as well. So I love it.
All right, let me ask you. I love, I'm going to go off course a tiny bit and skip one of the things because I want to hear you share with us. I know you love to break down words, and one of the words I hear you break down that is my favorite is disease. So
Mhm.
talk to me about that breakdown on your thoughts on the word, and specifically maybe get your opinion on how it shows up in the body and your relation to the story work that you do.
So dis-ease is a great word, because it describes a lot of different states. Um,
Right.
and we can take this a lot. Again, this is we've got the mountain of the conversation disease, and it's like, okay, which path do I want to take up this mountain? Right? How do I want to talk about this?
There.
Uh, with a background and long background in fitness and health and now wellness, I've had a shifting or perhaps expanding view of what disease is and how
Mhm.
disease is caused. And we'll kind of skip the ramifications for now, but disease is largely based on going back to what is going into our bodies or not going into our bodies in all of those forms. Disease is potentially, and too many processed foods is a huge one. Too many toxics or environmental toxins or pollutants, and that could be in the air or water or in the food that we're eating. It's a lack of touch, a lack of intimacy, platonic or romantic, a lack of love, right? And
Right.
that can cause disease. Disease, one of the greatest killers of human beings, especially older folks, is loneliness. And this is
Mm,
why in the blue zones, these areas around the world that are
right.
known for having the greatest instances of longevity and the fewest instances of disease, so many aspects of blue zone. It goes way beyond eating a Mediterranean diet or whatever it is. It's these people have connection, they have passion, they have purpose, they have a lot of them have a spiritual community, and
Right.
that maybe there's an aspect of spirituality that is very important, but it's also like, hey, you go to church or whatever every Sunday, and then you don't show up, and it's like, "Oh, somebody's gonna call Mary because she's normally here in the third row, and she wasn't here today, so let's check on her," right? So you've got people to rely
Right.
on, right? And so disease can be caused by a lot of things. If we're going to put a big macro on it, I put it's a lack of nourishment or the wrong types of nourishment that are causing so many of the diseases, especially the chronic ones. Your
Right.
diabetes, your heart disease, your the big killers, right? And there's
Right.
random ones in there too, but um, disease, and this is something that was so clearly realized for me at a couple various points in my life, but I used to believe that it was just the one side of the coin that mattered most, which was the fitness and the health, right?
Mm,
It's like, okay, well, fitness is measurable, and it takes a while to affect. We can
mhm.
have someone, run a mile or get on a bike and, see how fit somebody is. And fitness, especially cardiovascular fitness and especially physical strength, are great indicators of longevity. The more of those two you have, statistically, the longer and you are more likely to live. So it's okay, super important. But then I was like, okay, well, what about all these other factors? Like you could be super fit, but then what if you're not sleeping, or what if you're not eating well, or what if you're not, taking time to rest, or et cetera, et cetera. And so health became my main focus. And I was like, okay, health, this has got to be it. It's like, all right, well, also measurable, also takes a while to affect. We
Right.
can do blood work, we can take, stool samples, we can look at the gut microbiome. There's so many ways we can measure health, and health shows up differently than fitness. A bodybuilder on the stage at his absolute fittest or leanest is probably at his literal peak unhealthy at that very moment in time, so we can be tricked on all the ends of the spectrums here. But it's like, okay, so I spent a long time in health personally and professionally, and but still, it was like 50% of people just didn't get it.
Right.
And it was only working for 50% of the people, just like one side of the coin. And people were coming to me all the time talking about things that had nothing to do with health or fitness, but that were clearly causing a great state of dis-ease in
Mm,
their life. And it had to do potentially with their relationships or their work environment or stuff they went through from the past that was popping up that they couldn't stop thinking about, or creating tension or uh, states of conflict. Right? It was affecting their breath. I was like, all right,
right.
what about wellness? What's wellness? And wellness is instantaneously, and it could be changed just like that. And it's how you feel about yourself or how you view yourself and you view your life in any given moment. So I could be, you know, I could have gotten hit by the bus and I'm in the hospital and I've lost my fitness and I'm certainly not healthy. I got a lot of stuff going on, but maybe I'm unwell. Like, it's just, life sucks right now, right? But
Right.
then my mom and my two sisters walk in and they bring my best friend, and they brought my favorite food and my flowers and candy, and they brought my favorite movie, and now we're hanging out and we're having a good time, we're laughing and we're jovial, and things are different in that moment, and so my wellness just skyrocketed,
Gross.
right?
Yeah.
And so uh, ultimately for me, it's our words and our stories and our breath that dictate our physiology the most.
Right.
And it's those things that, when addressed and when positively affected, we're able to get out of those states of dis-ease, not necessarily disease, but
Mm,
certainly dis-ease, and
mhm.
just chop the dis off, right? Right.
Yeah.
We could be in a state of ease instead. And that can be accessed very simply through a breath that, just like this, that could be accessed through a mantra or an intention or an affirmation that feels really good for you. Like for me, it's I love myself. I love
Mhm.
myself. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. That could be accessed through removing some um, potentially harmful or conflicting stories inside, right? And letting those emotions move through, and um, stepping into that place of affluence and ease, and allowing my body to heal itself or heal its cells, which also very similar word. And so
Right.
uh, I spend all of my professional time in wellness now, and I still do fitness and health stuff personally, but
Right.
I am working stories because I think that is the greatest impactor of our physiological state.
Right. Well, and they'll funnel down when you're
Yep.
working wellness. People will gravitate towards the other pieces naturally as a result of working wellness.
Yeah, because we can create different stories around what working out means to us, or why we do it. And we create different stories about what it means to be healthy and how we can achieve those states. And then you just start feeling better because you're not talking crap to yourself all the time. And then it's like, hey,
Right.
like life's actually pretty good. Like, because life's good, like, let's go do this thing. And so it does snowball very, very quickly.
Right. And you attract other things into your life when you are in that state of ease and affluence that you wouldn't attract into your life if you weren't in those states.
Entirely accurate. And, ultimately, I like to say that the tide raises all boats, and
Mhm.
we take a story out that was hurting you, like everything else gets better.
Right.
We replace it with a story that is helping you, and like, okay, now the tide's coming in even further. Everything else
Right.
goes up. Yeah, right. All those F buckets get increased. So
Yeah. My favorite part of the call so far, the F buckets.
I love it.
Okay, let's finish off on I'm curious because that's my curiosity is what lands me in the role that I'm in, I always say. I'm always so curious. And one of my things that I've wondered about you and thought I've not actually, we haven't really talked about yet in our conversations as far as your thoughts on meditation. So what are your thoughts on it? And does it come into any of the work you do? And or in general, just how do you feel about it?
Yeah, and this is cool. I don't think anybody's ever asked me this before. Um, I am I kind of tie meditation in with spirituality in a way, and I'll tell you how. It also ties in with fitness or health for me too. And there's a great John Muir quote, who's a great American explorer, and it's got a couple trails named after him out in the West. He's an author, and he says, "I'd rather be in the mountains thinking about God than in church thinking about the mountains."
Mm,
And I don't personally meditate in the traditional sense of the word, which is, I think we see sitting on a cushion and legs crossed and, and just like
right.
observing thoughts coming in, coming out, like just having peace and quiet and stillness. And when I am in the mountains, I am in my flow. I tend to not be thinking. I tend to, maybe I'm moving, so I'm in an active meditation. And same
Mhm.
thing when I'm in my garden. I'm on a homestead, a third of an acre homestead here in just outside of Richmond, Virginia, and we raise rabbits and quail, and we're adding chickens and bees to the equation. I'm always out with my hands in the dirt, growing stuff, and just all kinds of fun things out there. And I lose track of time, and
Right.
so much so that I have gotten good at setting alarms on my watch of like, okay, next call's at 4. So I'm set an alarm for 3:53. That gives me enough time to stop what I'm doing, come in, wash my hands, and get on, right? Because otherwise, I'll just be out there all day long.
Right.
And those times for me are my meditation times. So
Right.
it's doing things that allow me to not be distracted, to stay on one task for periods of time, which is hard for somebody like me who is very active and probably a little ADHD or a lot of ADHD or whatever it may be. But
Right.
um, I think that whatever those things are, that you don't care about the time and you don't care about getting paid for it and you don't care about
Yeah.
any other thing other than doing the thing. Those are meditations in my world and in my definition. I encourage people to go do that
Right.
as often as possible, right?
Yeah.
And that can look way different than sitting on a mat. um, but again, there's a lot of ways to do it.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to do a lot of things, and I love the reason I asked was I was curious to know your definition because you have a view of life that's even different than a lot of people I speak to. You view language differently than a lot of people I speak to, and I agree. And I think one of the things we touched on earlier was we can't, or I mean, we can do whatever we like, but it's nice to stay open to the fact that there are many different ways to get to the place of ease, and meditation's one of them, and there's many forms that that takes that still is meditation.
I absolutely, and I also like for those who do sit on a mat and clear their mind. Like I have heard it to be profoundly helpful. Right? Like, hey,
Oh,
like maybe Dave should do more meditation. Like I could do more meditation, right? I can do more meditation potentially because it would be very, very helpful, right? And um, that I find there is great resistance in that to me. And so thus
right.
it doesn't come from a place of ease. And again, not that I'm not working hard or that I'm not doing the things that, I quote unquote should be doing or whatever, but I prefer to in in some aspects of my life, like listen to the resistance, and like
Mhm.
big goals require moving through resistance. And I get that. I've got a 100-mile ultra marathon to run for the first time ever in about 4 months. And so like some days I don't want to go run and train and I get to move through that resistance in pursuit of my bigger goal, and there's only so much resistance moving that one can do on a regular basis. So I prefer to get my meditations in either on a run or in the backyard or
Right.
on a mountaintop or something like that. And it what if it were easy? And for me, that makes my meditation easy. So
Exactly. Yeah, I love that question. What if it were easy? What would it look like if it were easy? And I think that's such a beautiful question to ask because I think we already are know the answer to, what if it were hard? So many of us,
yeah,
oh, I
yeah,
know exactly what that looks like.
exactly. Or and here's a different one that's kind of same flavor, same but different. It's like what could go wrong? What could
Mm,
go wrong? It's like, yo, we are great at as
mm,
a human species for the sake of survival of like looking at all the negative things that could happen with a situation. And
mhm.
okay, well, what if it goes right?
That's right. Yeah,
Like a lot
mind
of
blow.
times we don't even think about that. Yeah. Like so
I completely.
yeah.
I was driving on a personal story with my son. We were driving from Toronto to Ottawa, which is about a 4-hour drive. And I was taking him to his second year of university, and he was heading into a second year dormitory. And his first year in dorms didn't go so well. And he didn't really enjoy his roommate. So on the drive, he was going through how much he didn't like it and how worried he was about what it was going to look like, and he was just ruminating out loud and driving us all a little crazy, the other passengers, myself included. And I pulled the car over and I got a sticky note out, and I wrote on the sticky note, "What if it all works out?" And I stuck
Mm,
it to the dashboard just to help him shift from, a new dormitory where we didn't know what the situation was going to look like, and we were already, or he was already deciding that this was going to look like his first year that felt sticky, and he didn't like that feeling. So we get there. He's shifted his mindset for the second half of the drive. Everyone in the car is much happier. We get there, he ends up on the corner unit of the top floor with an extra window that overlooks the Rideau, the canal up there. And I looked at him and I said, "Here you go."
mm.
It all worked out.
It always does work out, and what I really like about that, first of all, is, like, the initiative that you took to do that, which is super cool, and I don't know many parents who are making those moves, so great job, big kudos, keep going. Uh,
Thank you.
the yeah, the second thing that I really like about that is, I think part of the maybe negative spin that some work like this can get, it's like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna manifest it and then write it down and everything's gonna be different," and it's like, well,
Mhm.
no, that's actually not
No,
how it works at all, right? But what ended up happening is the change in the words or the change in the story changed the physiological state, which meant he was probably much more apt to go up there with a smile versus go up there with a frown, both leading to different outcomes. He was probably
right,
much more apt to, having his roommate, hey, like, let's go out and grab a bite to eat tonight, or to get to know one another and say yes to that, or to potentially even invite that in versus being like, oh, this is going to suck. Everything sucks. And like, oh, I'm going to stay in. Right. And so, like,
right,
missing out on opportunities, and so there's a massive shift that can happen in the action side of the coin when we do change the words. And
right.
one of my favorite phrases is action dispels overwhelm.
Mm,
Action casts out overwhelm.
mhm.
And sometimes that action is just in the fact of making a decision. A lot of times with me and my clients, that action is in writing stuff down. So we take it out of our heads and put it onto the paper or put it
Right.
onto the computer screen and like, whoa, that feels way better
Way
just doing
better.
that. Way
Mhm.
better, right? And then it's like, okay, now we can prioritize which step to take in which direction. But ultimately, doing anything like makes things better.
Right.
So, a huge fan of what you did there.
Yeah, and you're so right, because I like that you point out that it didn't mean he was going to end up with this beautiful space that we just happened, but it does mean that his demeanor and how he approaches that space will be different, and
Hmm.
he'll view it from, this could be this could be good if I let it and allow it. This could be great, even.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
have to decide to hold the space for that to be, while we were driving another 2 hours down the road, and feeling that we could also even enjoy those additional 2 hours, or we could not enjoy those
It's our
2
choice.
hours. It's your choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's your choice. Okay, I know we've chatted forever, and I did say I don't like to keep these things too long, but I cannot leave this conversation. I have to go back to the question I skipped. So please tell me your thoughts on synchronicity. And the reason I'm curious on this one is because even you and I meeting. Here you are, Richmond, Virginia, doing similar work that I do in a different kind of different way. Um, and yet our paths cross and things line up, and here we are doing a podcast on our stories and on how we work our stories and on what you do and sharing. And I'm just curious. I personally will share this. I don't believe in coincidence. I think that we line up where we're supposed to line up. We are always, my mantra is I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and whatever that looks like. So what are your thoughts on that?
I always like to say we can connect the dots after we collect the dots.
That's right.
And
You
so
said
what
that
that means is
earlier.
we can look back on our lives and see, oh, this happened because of that, and that happened because of this, and then, oh, well, I made that decision because I was even right there, and et cetera. And so like
Mhm.
it's worked out thus far to whatever degree it's worked out, or we're here now for whatever reason we're here now. So I've got a notes app, a note on my iPhone that I've had for probably a decade plus, and I got it open now. I can scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and it's called my quotes notes. And so if
Mm,
I see something or read something or hear something or say something that I like, I immediately pull this up and I type it out or write it down or copy paste it or whatever it is. And so I think one day I will write a book based on my quotes notes. But until that point, uh, I'm left with an iPhone app. And I've got a quote here. It's a self quote. I said this one time and I was like, oh, hot damn, I'm going to write that down. Right. So uh,
I
I'm
love
self
it.
quoting myself here. So please
I
give me
love it.
give me a little, extra on the leash here. And it ties in. Right. So I say it's either all insignificant or all significant. Either nothing matters or everything matters. I like to believe the latter. And so it either like all happens for a reason or it doesn't all happen for a reason. I
Mm,
don't think there's any in between. We're either divinely guided or we're not. And it's totally random and totally by chance. And like, okay, again, the fact of what I believe, I don't necessarily believe what I believe is going to dictate, like, oh, if Dave says there's a God, there's a God. And if Dave doesn't say there's a God, well, there's no God, right? That's not what I'm saying, right? And we get to choose to believe what we want to believe in.
right.
And, the fact that I think that it is all significant, all of our acts are significant, all of our interactions are all significant. All of the conversations we have are all significant. That's how I view and choose to view the world. And so, along those lines, I also believe that it's not random. I also believe that
Right.
chance, like fate, is up for grabs. Like we have choice, right? We can make certain decisions and we're always going to be able to be in the right place at the right time when those decisions are made. We're always going to be able to make the right decisions. The cool thing about life is a lot of times you can change your mind, right, and go back down the mountain and try again. And that's cool. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Most of the time you can. But things happen for a reason. And so again, I'm very happy to be here talking with you and had that little, whatever strange events had to happen along the way
Right.
for us to line up here, and I think it's a cooler and more rewarding and more what's the word I'm looking for? Like comforting way to view the world
Mm,
is,
right.
hey, it's supposed to happen. Like, let's make the best of it. And like terrible things happen. Like, I just want to put a little
Right.
caveat in here.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of things that are truly awful about the world, and we can look at those and be like, oh, well, that's what the world is, or we can look at the other side of the world and say, oh, well, that's actually what the world is. And I believe
Right.
that we are all born good, and then we inherit stories or environments or situations that might shift us down another path. And no
That's
matter
right.
how long or what path we've been on or how long we've been on the path, we can always get off the path and
Always.
do another path. So it's up to us. And I encourage you, no matter what path you are on, listener, to keep going and keep listening to your gut and your intuition and make the decisions you get to make to be in the place you want to be.
Right. That's beautiful. I love your quote. First of all, I love it.
Thank you.
And I think you should write a book, but I guess that's up to you. One day we'll wait and see what happens. I think there's lots of things you say that as I was listening, I felt like my head was kind of always turned as I was listening to you, because there's lots of things you say that have made me think, and I think will make others think. And consciousness is a huge part of coming to the point where you're willing to work your story, and where you're willing to listen to the truth that sits right under your diaphragm, that's telling you, this might not be where you are supposed to be, or maybe you need to listen to what we're nudging you or telling you along the way. So I really appreciate having you on and hearing those thoughts, and you sharing so openly. And I am glad, when you said, what led us to this, I thought, oh my goodness, we would have to do a 3-hour podcast if I told you what I think led us to crossing paths, and the
Mm,
decisions that I made along the way to climb a different mountain and a different path. And
totally.
we would be here for a while. But, it makes you think. It does ask you to become aware and to sit in that awareness. So I am so full of, I know this word gets used all the time, but full of gratitude for the conversation, the opportunity. And I am so excited for when I put this out to my listeners, because I think they're in for such a treat. And it has been nothing but a pure joy. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. I really appreciate you and your platform and your energy. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to offer you a gift. I'd love to do a storywork session with you on me, right?
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
just to yeah, and
it'd be
I think
such
it'd
a
be really
dream.
cool. Yeah, we could play whatever level you want to play at. We can dive into whatever story you want to dive into. But I think if we do come back on, and do another one of these, it would be really cool to, explore some of those synchronicities, and also potentially, um, talk a little bit about what the process was like for you, and what you saw and
Right.
felt after, before and after and during working your stories. That would be really, really cool.
Oh, I would
So
love that. I will take that gift, and I would love to do that with you. That would be so much fun. And I think just another level for us to share what that experience was like, for me to work my story with you. So that would be fabulous. Thank you.
done.
All
You're so
right,
welcome.
done. All right. Well, we will definitely do more of these. I think there's so many other places to explore, and we will chat. We'll start with working a story and bringing that to life next for our listeners. So thank you again, and I cannot wait to have you back on here.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.